My cousin stormed into my apartment, looked straight at my girlfriend, and smirked. "You're wasting your time with this loser. Why settle when you can be with someone who actually gets things done?" Without hesitation, she began tossing my belongings onto the street, laughing the whole time. But karma wasn't far behind, and today, I'm ignoring dozens of frantic calls from both of them. In hindsight, it was obvious. The way Julia always kept her phone screen hidden from me. The subtle laughter whenever my cousin Aaron told a story at family dinners. The sudden curiosity about my work shifts. Julia and I had been together for almost 2 years. Aaron, however, was family my entire life. Someone I trusted without question. Yet here I was, unpacking my life from plastic bags in a cheap roadside inn at 4 a.m. For context, I'm Alex, 29 years old. Aaron, my 34-year-old cousin, has always been the charismatic, confident one in our family. He thrived in finance, drove a company BMW, and carried himself with an arrogance people either admired or resented. Julia, 27, caught my eye at a friend's wedding. Beautiful, witty, and always impeccably dressed. Sometimes she'd glance at me like she wondered how she ended up with someone like me. I should have recognized that look sooner. It was a typical Friday. My shift at the warehouse ended early due to a malfunction. Texted Julia I'd be home sooner, but no reply. Typical. Her phone always had issues. Arrived home around 3:45 p.m. to voices coming from our bedroom. Initially, I thought Julia might have been on a video call. Then, unmistakably, Aaron's booming laugh echoed through the door. Frozen in disbelief, I listened. "Alex is going nowhere," Aaron said bluntly. 5 years at that warehouse. Zero ambition. He's holding you back." "He's sweet," Julia sighed dismissively. "But sweet doesn't pay the bills or plan futures." Fury simmered inside me as I quietly pushed open the door. There they were, lounging casually. Julia perched on the edge of the bed, Aaron leaning back against my pillows, relaxed as if he belonged there. "What's happening here?" My voice betrayed my anger and confusion. Aaron barely acknowledged me. "Hey, Alex. Thought you were working late." "What is this, Aaron?" I demanded. Julia rolled her eyes dramatically. "We're just having an honest conversation. About how pathetic I am." My anger rose further. Aaron stood, towering over me as always. Someone needed to tell her. "Face it, Alex. You're comfortable with mediocrity. Julia deserves better." "And you're better?" "You're engaged," I spat back. Aaron shrugged nonchalantly. "Stacy knows how things are. She's realistic." Julia crossed her arms defensively. "Alex, it's over. I need more than empty promises and a dead-end job." "How long has this been going on?" My voice shook. Julia hesitated, avoiding eye contact. "Nothing's happened, yet, but I've realized what I want." Aaron smirked. "Don't take it personally. Some people lead, some follow." My vision sharpened suddenly. "Get out," I said flatly. "Actually," Julia interjected, "maybe you should be the one leaving." Speechless, I gathered what I could quickly. Clothes, essentials, family photos. Julia casually tossed trash bags my way. "Fill these. I want you out tonight." As I left, Aaron called after me. "No hard feelings, Alex. You'll find your league someday." I didn't respond. Drove aimlessly before settling into the cheapest motel I found. Sorting through my belongings, I stumbled upon an old tablet, still logged into the cloud where Julia backed up her phone. Their texts told a different story. Months of hidden flirtation, secret meetings, mocking me behind my back. Aaron's arrogance was palpable, relishing in my failures and celebrating his victories at my expense. Julia, captivated by his facade, willingly played along. "You should have seen Alex's face when I got promoted," Aaron texted smugly. "Same look he always had when I won anything growing up." Julia replied, "He tries, you know." Aaron shot back, "Trying doesn't win games. It just makes losing easier." My heartbreak slowly crystallized into resolve. They thought they'd destroyed me, but they'd forgotten one thing. Everyone loves an underdog. With quiet determination, I plotted my next move, one they would never see coming. All of it saved, screenshots neatly cataloged. Digging deeper, I found Damien's upcoming big promotion at Uncle Edwin's firm scheduled next month, with his engagement to Madeline just around the corner in 2 weeks. It was the perfect life he'd relentlessly flaunted in front of me for years, The kind of success he casually risked just to score another cheap win against me. They mistook my silence for weakness, my calmness for cowardice, never grasping that the quietest storms are the most dangerous. But now, sitting alone in this cheap motel, scrolling through the messages between my ex-girlfriend and my own brother, flipping past photos of Damien and Madeline on her perfectly curated Instagram, reading glowing testimonials about Damien's supposed integrity on the corporate site, I've finally had enough. I spent my whole life stepping aside, letting him snatch things I valued. This ends now. Damien and Sienna have no clue what's coming for them. By next week, they'll be frantically calling me, pleading for mercy. My brother always said I didn't have the guts to fight back. Time to show him just how badly he's underestimated me. Update number 1. First off, waking up to an avalanche of supportive notifications after my last post was surreal. Your words kept me grounded when all I wanted was to spiral out. If you're just catching up, my brother Damien convinced my girlfriend Sienna I was too weak, too insignificant to matter. She kicked me out, took his side, and laughed me out the door. I found their texts, decided it was time they both paid a price. That's the TLDR. 9 days since everything fell apart. 9 days stuck in a motel. Walls so thin I could hear the couple next door bickering about Fortnite at 2 a.m. But mostly 9 days meticulously crafting my next moves. This wasn't about emotion or rage anymore. It was surgical precision. First step, I called in sick, bought myself 48 uninterrupted hours to sort through every screenshot, every shred of evidence. Made a dedicated Google Drive folder. Months of text between Damien and Sienna, candid photos and messages detailing exactly how they'd planned to tear me apart. One message from Damien was particularly vivid. Getting Sienna was the easy part, but seeing Parker's face when he realizes he's lost again, that's priceless, like snatching candy from a baby. Or, in his case, a girlfriend from a born loser, LMAO. That message lit something within me at 4 a.m. that night, wired and restless, gulping down motel coffee. I sat there, mapping out every single thing Damien treasured. His promotion at Uncle Edwin's company next month, his upcoming engagement to Madeline, his spotless golden boy image within our family. You don't hurt someone by taking what they have. You target what they cherish most. Madeline was my first stop. I texted her under the pretense of planning Damien's bachelor party, claiming to need her opinion. Maybe whiskey tasting versus craft brewery tour. She seemed surprised I still cared enough about my best man duties, given everything that had just gone down. I played innocent, acting clueless, and she bought it. We met the next afternoon at a trendy coffee place that serves ridiculously overpriced drinks with fancy foam art. Got there 15 minutes early, paid $7 for a basic black coffee. Totally worth it. Madeline arrived looking hesitant, clearly preparing herself to have a delicate conversation. After initial polite chat about the wedding, she cautiously asked how I was holding up post-breakup. Damien had fed her some sanitized version. That Sienna and I simply grew apart, a mutual mature decision. I listened without interruption, nodding sympathetically. When she finished, I calmly asked if she'd like to see what really happened. Watching her face change as she scrolled through the screenshots was strangely satisfying. First disbelief, then slow recognition, the color draining from her cheeks as she absorbed every word. She insisted there had to be some misunderstanding, some missing context. I didn't argue, just handed her my phone. She scrolled silently, wedding ring twisting anxiously on her finger. Eventually, she raised her eyes, shaking but composed. "Has he done this before?" she asked softly. I hesitated, not for lack of an answer, but because vocalizing the truth felt like crossing a boundary. But Damien had already shredded every boundary between us. So I told her about Jessica from college, about our cousin's friend at the lake 2 summers ago, and about the ex-girlfriend who inexplicably fell for his roommate. A clear pattern emerged, undeniable and brutal. Madeline took copies of everything, quietly requested space to process, and left without another word. I felt an unexpected surge of respect toward her. Phase 2 involved accessing our family's shared photo account, the one Mom set up years ago, still secured by her embarrassingly predictable birthday password. Scrolling through, I uncovered the Thanksgiving photos from 3 years back. Damien cozying up with his co-worker Heather, telling everyone his girlfriend was too sick to come. Photos from New Year's Eve where he cornered our neighbor's daughter in the kitchen. The camping trip where he vanished into the woods with my buddy's sister. Evidence, history, undeniable patterns. Uncle Edwin posed the greatest challenge. Damien had always been his favorite, the surrogate son he never had. My approach had to be cautious. I called Edwin, asking to meet him at his upscale country club after work, pretending to seek career guidance. He ordered a scotch, offering me one despite knowing I hated it. Politeness dictated acceptance. Edwin went through the standard script, probing my career ambitions, management potential, classic Edwin stuff. I waited patiently, then subtly shifted the topic to Damien's imminent promotion. Casually expressed concern about nepotism accusations affecting Damien's reputation. Edwin stiffened, insisting Damien's success was purely merit-based. Perfect moment to strike. Casually, almost hesitantly, I mentioned some troubling rumors about how Damien secured the Northfield account last quarter. Edwin narrowed his eyes, wary but interested, asking for specifics. I showed him carefully selected screenshots. Damien bragging to Sienna about claiming credit for his team's achievements. Damien casually mentioning using company resources for personal gains. None of it strictly illegal, just questionable enough to cast shadows on his golden boy persona. Edwin stared silently, finished his scotch, then quietly ordered another. By the time we parted, Edwin was thoughtfully asking about other accounts Damien had managed. A quiet storm indeed. Edwin ordered a glass of scotch, offering me one out of politeness. I reluctantly accepted, despite my distaste for the bitter burn. Typical Edwin, he opened with questions about my career plans, whether I saw myself moving into management or settling comfortably into obscurity. I let him deliver his rehearsed speech before shifting the conversation toward Damien's impending promotion, cautiously hinting about potential issues around favoritism. Edwin immediately became defensive, insisting Damien's rise had been purely meritocratic. Perfect. Casually, I mentioned rumors I'd heard about how Damien handled the Northfield contract. Edwin's eyes narrowed as he demanded more details. Feigning reluctance, I showed him carefully curated screenshots I'd been saving for weeks. Texts where Damien boasted to Sienna about taking credit for his team's efforts, skirting company policy by using resources for personal favors. Nothing blatantly illegal, but enough to question his integrity. Edwin stared silently at my phone, finished his drink in one swift gulp, and immediately ordered another. When we parted ways an hour later, Edwin's earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by pointed concerns about Damien's trustworthiness on other key accounts. He asked if there was more evidence. Who else might know? Seeds effectively planted. A couple of days later, Mom organized a family dinner. Her go-to move whenever one of us faced a personal crisis. This time, that crisis was supposed to be mine. It was my first time seeing Damien since he'd orchestrated my humiliation. He arrived late, distracted by his buzzing phone, visibly tense. He'd lost weight, stress evident behind his usually perfect mask. Throughout dinner, I remained impeccably polite. Helped Mom with the dishes, asked Dad about his recent checkup, even brought out Monopoly like nothing was amiss. Damien spent the evening glancing anxiously at his phone, visibly distressed by whatever messages he was receiving. Eventually, he excused himself, heading outside to take a call. I could see him through the kitchen window, pacing furiously in the yard, gestures frantic. When he returned, Damien's eyes kept darting toward me, suspicion clouding his expression, as if he could sense my hand behind his misfortune. I maintained a relaxed, cheerful facade, rolling dice, smiling, completely composed. By 10, Damien abruptly stood up, mumbling something vague about an early meeting, fleeing the dinner in obvious panic. The fallout began early the next morning. Sienna's frantic texts, Edwin's missed calls, Madeline's cautious email requesting another talk. Damien himself reached out by noon, desperate and accusatory. "Whatever you're up to, stop it. This isn't funny." Ignored, screenshot taken, saved. I met Madeline again later that week. She looked exhausted, drained. Over coffee and fries, she told me everything. Damien had denied the texts at first, then gradually admitted the truth, but only partially, claimed it was just flirtation, then later confessed it had escalated once. Madeline, however, had done her homework, uncovering evidence of other betrayals. She calmly returned the ring. We spent an hour discussing lost deposits and relieved family members who never liked Damien anyway. By the end, she managed a genuine laugh. As if on cue, Damien called again, voice slurred, barely coherent despite it being early in the day. Madeline sat silently, listening as he begged me to stop ruining his life, lamenting his shattered engagement, Edwin's sudden scrutiny at work, and accusing me of envy and sabotage. He claimed I was bitter, jealous, that Sienna had been unhappy for months anyway. I let his voice fade into silence before softly replying, "Maybe now you'll realize some actions actually have consequences." I ended the call and glanced at Madeline. She gripped her coffee mug with such intensity, her knuckles were turning white. Softly, she murmured how she'd been ready to spend her entire life with Damien, until now. She seemed oddly calm, mentioning how she'd privately canceled everything without even confronting him, face to face yet. Her quiet dignity surprised me. I'd misjudged her strength. By the time I got back to the motel room, my phone was a mess. Over 20 missed calls, endless texts from Sienna begging me to respond, and a single voicemail from Uncle Edwin, curtly requesting a call about Damien's situation. Another text arrived from Sienna as I sat down to process everything. "Please, just answer. I messed up. We need to talk." A short while later, Mom called, worried. Damien had stumbled into their house drunk. Dad had driven him home in silence. Mom wanted answers. I promised her the full story tomorrow, printing everything out to let my parents finally see their golden child clearly for the first time. That Monday, Uncle Edwin summoned me to his corner office. The scent of expensive leather and stale scotch filled the room. He leaned back in his chair, his expression serious as he confessed he'd uncovered discrepancies in Damien's work. Not outright fraud, but small manipulations. Taking credit for team efforts, inflating performance numbers, misusing company resources. Classic Damien moves. Edwin's pride was wounded, having always treated Damien like his own son. He expressed disappointment, asked if I'd known earlier. A small part of me instinctively wanted to minimize it, to smooth things over as I'd done countless times before. But I didn't. The memory of Damien and Sienna's laughter as I carried my belongings out in garbage bags silenced my instinct to forgive. Madeline reached out days later, wanting to return something she'd found at Damien's apartment. Meeting her again, I noticed she looked lighter, relieved almost. She handed me a box containing a watch I'd saved months to give Damien for his 30th birthday. She told me she'd found it discarded carelessly on a shelf. She hesitated, then thanked me quietly, admitting I'd saved her from making the biggest mistake of her life. For the first time, I felt genuine warmth toward her. We talked about small things, laughing over trivial matters I'd forgotten existed. Normalcy I didn't realize I missed. Before parting ways, Madeline turned serious again, expressing gratitude for sparing her from a lifetime of humiliation. Her voice shook slightly as she said, "I almost married someone who was never who he pretended to be." But the biggest surprise came from Heather, Sienna's roommate. She messaged me on Instagram, uncomfortable holding on to items Sienna hadn't bothered to throw out. When we met, Heather nervously admitted that Damien had been regularly visiting their apartment for months. Sienna had coldly plotted the breakup, waiting until she felt safe enough to discard me. They had even laughed about how oblivious I was. Then came the twist. Heather revealed Damien had abruptly stopped contacting Sienna right after everything blew up, left her feeling betrayed, used, and discarded, exactly how they'd made me feel. As Heather finished her story, I thanked her, feeling an unexpected calm, because Damien and Sienna had misjudged me. Quiet was never weakness, it was patience, and sometimes patience is the most devastating weapon of all. Heather looked at me, her eyes confused. "I really don't get why you're ignoring Sienna. She made one mistake, but she genuinely loved you." I stared back, wondering if she was serious. A mistake? Would she call it a mistake if someone deliberately lit a match and burned down their house? Quietly, I asked if she really believed someone who mocked and deceived me for months truly loved me. Heather bit her lip, uncertain. But she did have something important for me, my favorite hoodie and a couple of books I'd left behind. As she handed them to me in a crumpled shopping bag, she hesitated before blurting, "Listen, if you're ever lonely or bored, maybe we could grab dinner. Just friends, obviously." I thought about it and smiled. Told her I'd recently signed a lease for a small apartment downtown. Ancient radiator, thin walls, but no snakes disguised as roommates. Said maybe dinner would be nice. She smiled back, relieved. Sunday afternoon came around, family dinner at my parents' house. Dad barbecued burgers while Aunt Cheryl offered her potato salad, notorious for giving us heartburn, but no one ever had the courage to decline. Damien wasn't there, and no one mentioned him until halfway through dinner. When I asked, Mom sighed heavily, said Damien was taking some personal time, avoiding eye contact. Uncle Edwin glanced sharply at me, mentioning casually he'd heard I was looking for a new job. He hinted about an opening in his company, one Damien wouldn't be filling now. I stayed quiet, taking small satisfaction from watching my family's perception of me change. After dessert, Mom finally broke the awkward silence, softly admitting, "We messed up with both of you. Spoiled Damien. Underestimated you." I just nodded, accepting her quiet apology. Dad handed me an envelope as I was leaving, called it an apology. Cash. I tried to refuse, but he insisted it was their way of acknowledging past mistakes. Took it reluctantly, not quite sure how to feel about it. This morning I finally blocked Sienna's number. Her final texts echoed in my mind. Empty apologies, excuses about being manipulated. Too late. Her words stirred nothing in me now, not anger, not triumph. Just quiet closure. I felt empty, but cleanly empty, like a fresh page. Damien lost everything he valued. His perfect engagement, his reputation, his promotion. Sienna learned she was never more than a pawn. And me? I'd lost illusions and gained clarity. Am I fully healed? Number I wake up, sometimes expecting to see her beside me, but each morning it's easier to accept that my past 18 months were spent with someone who never existed. This week, Heather and I are grabbing dinner. No expectations, just company. Madeline's returned watch hangs on my new apartment wall. A subtle reminder that true strength isn't about dominance, but about holding your integrity when others fail. Turns out the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones quietly watching and waiting, the ones who know exactly when it's their turn.